Imagine a massive steel fortress floating across the deep ocean. It measures 219 meters from bow to stern. It rises 16 stories above the crashing waves. Inside this colossal structure sits a cargo worth hundreds of millions of dollars. 9,200 electric vehicles parked bumper to bumper in absolute darkness. This is the BYD Shenzhen. It is not owned by a traditional maritime logistics conglomerate. It is owned by the very company that manufactured the cars locked inside its belly. This breaks a fundamental rule of global trade. Automakers build cars. They do not operate deep ocean fleets. Ford does not own ships. General Motors does not own ships. Tesla does not own ships. Yet, a Chinese automotive manufacturer just launched the largest car-carrying vessel in human history. They did this to bypass a global shipping monopoly and seize direct control over the oceans. The sea is where the world reveals its crises before anywhere else. When a single company decides to build an entire armada just to move its own product across the globe, you are looking at a market failure of spectacular proportions. We are witnessing an aggressive takeover of international logistics routes. The sheer scale of 18 million kilograms of metal and lithium crossing the Pacific under a single corporate banner changes the entire structure of international trade. These videos take enormous effort to research, so please hit subscribe. Where are you watching this from? Let's orient ourselves before we get into this. For the past 50 years, the ocean transport of finished vehicles operated as a quiet monopoly. A handful of specialized shipping lines controlled the entire market from the shadows. Companies like Wallenius Wilhelmsen from Norway and NYK Line from Japan built massive fleets designed specifically for one single task. They moved cars from factory ports in Asia and Europe to consumers in North America, South America, and beyond. Automakers treated these shipping lines like a public utility. You build the vehicle, you drive it to the dock, you pay the freight fee, and the shipping company takes care of the ocean crossing. Whoever controls movement sets the price. The great trading empires of history understood this perfectly. Venice dominated the Mediterranean through its naval fleet, not its domestic production. The Dutch East India Company monopolized the global spice trade by controlling the sea lanes, not by growing crops. The maritime companies moving the cars held all the leverage. They decided when a vehicle would sail and how much it would cost to get it there. They guarded their operational data aggressively. If an automaker wanted to expand into a new market, they had to negotiate for allocation space on these vessels months in advance. The shipping lines dictated the transit schedules, the port calls, and the ultimate speed of global automotive expansion. It was a perfect toll bridge on the global economy. As long as the global supply of ships matched the global output of cars, this system functioned smoothly. The Japanese economic export miracle of the 1970s and 1980s relied entirely on these boxy logistics ships to flood the American market with reliable sedans. The automakers accepted their reliance on these third-party maritime giants because building a deep-sea fleet requires billions of dollars in upfront capital. A single vessel costs well over $100 million to construct and takes years to complete. The massive shipyards in South Korea, Japan, and China maintain order books that are filled years in advance. Operating these vessels demands specialized maritime knowledge, complex insurance negotiations, and thousands of trained crew members. For decades, the barrier to entry remained impenetrable. Car companies focused entirely on their assembly lines. Shipping companies focused entirely on the oceans. No one crossed the boundary. Then, the mathematics of global trade broke down completely. Between 2019 and 2024, the Chinese automotive industry experienced an explosion in production that shattered all historical precedents. In 2019, China exported roughly 700,000 vehicles. By 2023, that number surged past 5 million units. China rapidly overtook Japan to become the single largest vehicle exporter on the planet. By 2024, the export volume approached 5,800,000 vehicles. Millions of new electric cars poured out of automated factories and flooded into the coastal ports of Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Yantai. But the cars had nowhere to go. The global shipping fleet simply lacked the physical capacity to absorb this sudden tidal wave of metal and batteries. The worldwide fleet of specialized car-carrying ships numbered only around 700 active vessels. Furthermore, during the recent global pandemic, many logistics operators scrapped their older ships anticipating a massive global recession. When consumer demand exploded instead, the market faced an absolute shortage of vessel space. The fundamental laws of supply and demand took over the docks. With too many cars fighting for too little deck space, the shipping companies realized exactly what kind of power they possessed. In 2021, chartering a standard car-carrying vessel cost around $12,500 a day. By early 2024, the daily rate for that exact same ship skyrocketed to $115,000. The spot market for chartering a vessel went completely insane. When a logistics broker called to secure deck space for 10,000 cars, the shipping lines simply named their price. It was a seller market of the highest order. The automakers realized that their entire profit margin on a $30,000 electric vehicle was being wiped out by a massive freight bill before the car even reached the dealership. Automakers watched their capital evaporate at the port. They tried desperate alternatives. Companies attempted to shove finished cars into standard 20-foot or 40-foot shipping containers. But loading vehicles into shipping containers requires expensive wooden racks, massive labor hours, and severe risk of damage during transit. It proved completely inefficient. Automakers faced a brutal reality: pay the extortionate maritime shipping rates or leave the cars rusting on the concrete docks. This incredible bottleneck forced a radical solution. Instead of negotiating with the shipping cartels, BYD decided to become one. The automaker authorized a $700 million investment to construct a proprietary fleet of 8 massive ocean vessels. They bypassed the global logistics market entirely. This brings us to the internal engineering of these mechanical beasts. The maritime industry calls them roll-on roll-off ships. Unlike traditional cargo ships that load heavy steel boxes using giant gantry cranes, a roll-on roll-off vessel is essentially a floating multi-story parking garage engineered to survive the most violent ocean storms on Earth. The BYD Shenzhen represents the absolute peak of this specialized architecture. Built by Guangzhou Shipyard International, the vessel measures 219 meters in length and 37.7 meters in width. Loading one of these massive ships requires relentless military precision. Specialized port workers, called stevedores, drive the cars up massive, reinforced steel stern ramps under their own power. Once inside the hull, the vehicles navigate through a complex maze of internal ramps connecting the 16 separate decks. Engineers designed several of these decks to be adjustable. Massive hydraulic lifts can raise or lower the deck ceilings to accommodate different vehicle heights, allowing the ship to pack compact sedans tightly alongside heavy industrial trucks. Every single vehicle must be securely lashed down to the steel deck using heavy-duty straps connected to specialized anchor points. If a severe storm hits the open Pacific Ocean and the ship rolls 30 degrees, a loose vehicle could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. One unsecured car crashing into another can destroy hundreds of vehicles and shift the center of gravity enough to capsize the entire vessel. The sheer structure of the ship requires extreme balance. With thousands of heavy cars parked high above the waterline, the vessel becomes top-heavy. Roll-on-roll-off ships utilize massive ballast water tanks positioned deep at the bottom of the hull. Pumping thousands of tons of seawater into these tanks lowers the center of gravity and prevents the ship from blowing over in high winds. Transporting electric vehicles introduces an entirely new engineering threat to the operation. Lithium-ion batteries burn with ferocious intensity if they catch fire. A battery fire on a standard open-air cargo ship poses a severe danger. A battery fire inside a sealed steel box carrying 9,000 electric cars in the middle of the ocean creates a nightmare scenario. To counter this extreme risk, the ship features advanced heat detection sensors and specialized chemical suppression systems designed specifically to smother electric vehicle fires with expanding foam and water mist. The sheer scale of the engineering extends deep into the engine room. The vessel utilizes a highly advanced electronic control system that monitors the internal atmosphere of every single cargo deck in real time. If the sensors detect a sudden spike in temperature or the presence of combustion gases, the automated suppression systems can seal off that specific deck to starve the fire of oxygen. This compartmentalization is critical because an uncontrolled fire on a ship carrying thousands of high-voltage batteries cannot be extinguished with traditional water hoses. Furthermore, the ship propulsion system utilizes highly advanced dual-fuel technology. The massive internal combustion engines burn traditional heavy marine fuel, but they can seamlessly switch to burning liquefied natural gas. This secondary fuel source drastically reduces sulfur emissions and carbon output when the ship approaches heavily regulated ports in Europe and North America. The vessel even carries its own massive stationary battery packs on deck. These battery units provide electrical power to run the ship ventilation and lighting systems while docked, ensuring absolute zero emissions while in port. You are looking at a masterclass in heavy industrial engineering designed to project corporate power across thousands of miles of hostile ocean. Yet every logistical strategy carries a hidden flaw. This proprietary maritime fleet suffers from a massive operational defect. In the commercial shipping industry, profitability depends entirely on round-trip utilization. When the BYD Shenzhen leaves the Chinese coast, loaded with 9,200 cars bound for Europe or Brazil, the outbound journey makes perfect economic sense. The problem begins the moment the last car drives down the ramp in Rotterdam or Suape. The massive ship must return to Asia to pick up the next batch of vehicles. But Europe and Latin America do not manufacture and export thousands of cars back to China. There is no lucrative cargo waiting on the European docks to fill those 16 empty decks. This massive imbalance creates a phenomenon known in logistics as deadheading. These colossal steel skyscrapers must sail back across the ocean almost entirely empty. The physics of ocean transit offer no discounts for empty vessels. An unloaded ship still requires thousands of tons of bunker fuel to cross the sea. It still requires a fully paid crew of maritime professionals. It still pays the exact same exorbitant transit fees to cross the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal. Moving a massive heavy vessel through thousands of nautical miles of open water costs tens of thousands of dollars every single day. A ship sailing around the Cape of Good Hope to avoid geopolitical conflicts in the Red Sea adds weeks to the journey, burning even more fuel. Without any cargo to generate revenue on the return leg, the entire financial burden of the return trip must be absorbed by the profit margin of the outbound journey. Traditional global shipping lines survive this brutal dynamic by meticulously coordinating complex triangulation routes. They might drop Asian cars in Europe, sail empty for a short distance to pick up German industrial machinery, transport that machinery to the Americas, and then load agricultural equipment for the final leg back to Asia. A pure car manufacturer cannot execute these complex multi-industry maneuvers. Their logistics network operates as a strict one-way street. Operating a dedicated fleet means BYD is intentionally burning millions of dollars in operating costs on every single return voyage. They are subsidizing the empty ocean miles simply to guarantee that their domestic factories never have to stop producing. They are choosing operational certainty over sheer logistical efficiency. This brings us to the final reality of this situation. The old model of outsourcing international logistics died. We are entering an era of vertical integration that borders on the absurd. We have reached a point where manufacturing the advanced electric vehicle is the easy part. Moving that vehicle across a fractured and expensive global supply chain serves as the ultimate test of corporate survival. In my opinion, as someone who knows maritime logistics, this extreme strategy reveals the true scale of Chinese industrial ambition. The executives realized that the only way to conquer the global automotive market was to conquer the oceans first. They willingly absorb the massive financial losses of empty return voyages because controlling the logistics network offers a strategic advantage that pure money cannot buy: absolute independence. The strategic value of this fleet goes beyond simple transportation. In an era of increasing geopolitical tension, relying on foreign shipping companies exposes a massive vulnerability. If a trade war escalates or a geopolitical conflict erupts, foreign logistics companies could simply refuse to transport Chinese vehicles. By owning the physical assets that cross the ocean, BYD completely immunizes itself against global shipping boycotts. They have secured their own physical pipeline to the global consumer market. This level of vertical integration has not been seen since the era of Henry Ford. They extract the raw materials from the earth. They manufacture the advanced battery cells. They assemble the final vehicle. And now they operate the massive maritime vessels that deliver the product directly to your local port. They own the entire chain from dirt to driveway. We will soon see other massive multinational corporations following this exact path, transforming themselves into sprawling logistics empires just to protect their core manufacturing business. Is this the smartest move of the decade or a disaster waiting to happen? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.